Your support helps us bring you programs you love. Go to WyomingPBS.org, click on Support, and become a sustaining member or an annual member. It's easy and secure. Thank you.
I'm Steve Peck of Wyoming PBS. We're nearing the completion of the third week of the 67th Wyoming Legislature, and Medicaid expansion has become a key issue. We'll speak with Representative Ember Oakley and Representative Steve Harshman. Join us for Capitol Outlook.
This program is supported in part by a grant from the BNSF Railway Foundation, dedicated to improving the general welfare and quality of life in communities throughout the BNSF Railway service area. Proud to support Wyoming PBS.
And by the members of Wyoming PBS. Thank you for your support.
Hi, I'm Steve Peck of Wyoming PBS, and welcome to this week's edition of Capitol Outlook. We're here at the state capitol today with Representative Steve Harshman, House District 37, and Representative Ember Oakley, House District 55. Thanks to both of you for being with us today and making an unusual time of day available to us right after adjournment, the end of a long day for you. So we appreciate this. We know how busy it is, and thanks for being with us. I wanted to talk to you both today, at least at the beginning, about the Medicaid expansion issue that's in Wyoming. Representative Oakley, there's a bill. Tell us quickly where it stands now.
So House Bill 80 is this year's version of the Medicaid expansion bill. It was heard in our committee, the Revenue Committee, and passed out of there with a 6-3 vote. And so it is on the general file now. So
the expectation is, of course, it would come to the floor to be debated by the Committee of the Whole, and everybody who hasn't worked the bill yet will start to be able to do that. Is that
That's correct,
okay.
Mr. Peck, yeah.
This has been an issue that's been around for a long time. And Representative Harshman, you've been in the legislature for, I think, is this your 20th year now?
21st
year. So you remember when it first arose. And there's a sense this session that things are a little different. And I want to make sure we get to that, but I want to walk us through it more gradually. Let's begin with something basic. What is Medicaid?
Well, Medicaid is really just, there's three types of public insurance, right? We have private insurance. We know those large companies. But then public insurance, Medicare for elderly citizens.
And that's a universal.
Universal. Veterans benefits is a public insurance system. And then Medicaid, which is really in Wyoming, the Medicaid program in Wyoming is only for poor children and disabled adults. That's it. And that is a cost share with the federal government. And currently it's based on the state's average household income. And we have an outlier in Wyoming. We have Teton County, the wealthiest county in America, which really drives our average household income up. So unfortunately, Idaho's got a 70% federal, 30% state match. Utah, 70-30. Montana, 60-some, 40-some. But Wyoming's 50-50. And so that, every 5 percentage points is $25 million a year in state funds that costs us. So we're trying to fix that issue as well with this Medicaid expansion bill.
Mm-hmm. So part of what you just explained having something to do with Teton County and the way that each state handles it differently and the numbers in each state make it less than a universal process, because although it's a federal program, states administer it individually to their own devices and with their own funding, depending. In Wyoming, this creates a gap, am I stating that correctly, with people who can't quite afford an Affordable Care Act policy on their own, who aren't covered with one of the other things that you mentioned,
right?
Who also are considered to be too high income, so to speak, to qualify for typical Medicaid. So we're trying, and the number of people in the state is typically at about 20,000. Is that a fair figure? Some people say it's more than that, but that's a figure that most people can live with, right?
Right, and the group we're talking about are adults, single, able-bodied adults, who make under 100% of the federal poverty level, which is $12,800 a year. Now, if you make $1 over that, you can buy insurance off the exchange, heavily subsidized by the federal government. Maybe $5 a month is your premium to have the best gold plan, best insurance you can buy. But if you make a few dollars less, no insurance at all. And so those folks then end up in our hospital emergency rooms, don't get care, right? Increased mortality rates. But when they do use those emergency services, it gets passed on to the rest of us. And then it increases insurance rates for everybody.
Now, Representative Oakley, I'm correct in knowing or saying I believe that most states have, to use the lack of a better word, have passed Medicaid expansion. Wyoming is one of the ones that hasn't. What is there, and maybe we partly answered this as well, but what would the bill exactly do?
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Representative Harshman knows this very well, but so this does that gap that we've discussed, so from up to 138% of the poverty level. So what this does is creates insurance for what we dub a lot when we're talking about this, for the working poor. So these are able-bodied adults, but they are working. Maybe they work at a convenience store, using that as an example.
Or they don't have benefits from their job.
And they don't have benefits, and so they don't have any insurance, and they don't make enough to either buy insurance or receive health care. So what we're trying to do is address that issue for about 20,000 Wyomingites, where they could access health care in an affordable manner for them, and also hopefully in a manner that then our health care facilities also receive compensation for providing that service.
Which is a complicated issue in and of itself, of course. Mr. Harshman, you've been around since before this issue came to the Wyoming Legislature, and through the years, what has been the objection to it in Wyoming, typically?
Yeah, I think part of it, it's a 90-10 federal match. And first of all, just to expand on Representative Oakley, she said it right. And so who are we talking about? These are the working poor. 2/3 of these folks are women. Most of them are ages 23 to 35. The next biggest group is that 58 to 65 group before Medicare. But they're working people. Almost 2/3 of these folks are working. But it's the biggest issue, I think, is this 90-10 match. All the feds will renege on this agreement. Now, that's federal law. There'd have to be a law changed by Congress. Every time we've written this, we've written in that if that changes, we're out. Now, I've voted against this probably 10 times. We've tried, we said, we're going to figure out a Wyoming way to do this. We've explored all kinds of, we've had at least 5 initiatives over the last 10 years. And it's too expensive or none of it works. And so we really don't have a better plan. And so we look at the other 40 states now. We've waited and we've been rightly cautious. I mean, we didn't want to jump into this thing. But as you watch, all of our surrounding states now have done it. And Montana most recently. When I served as Speaker, I got to know other leaders around the country. And the Montana leader said, he told me, I'll never forget this. I got him on my cell phone contacts. He said, I never voted for it. But see, the part of the talking points where it's destroyed Montana's budget and all that, he said, it didn't destroy our budget. He said, it saved our rural health care system. And and we know this, it's $100 million just to our hospitals, not necessarily the doctors and clinics, but there's $100 million a year in uncompensated care. Montana's recovered about 45% of that. We conservatively estimate we'll recover 25% of that at a minimum, probably $25 million of that hospital care that goes uncompensated in your public hospital, my hospital, and so on. So, and probably much more. And I think the experience Montana had, I think, bodes well for us. In the early days, 10 years ago, I think the estimates were not real reliable. I think we've watched all these other 40 states. I think we've got good data. And I think it's been a process as I've learned more, but I think the people of Wyoming have learned more too. And I think you see that in the polls and all that. And I think the other thing is, we've got a federal government that's in debt. Why would we add to the federal debt? Those kind of things. Those are the arguments. But I think, we have the largest economy in the world. If our Congress gets busy, they can take out a mortgage and pay this federal debt off.
Well, that's the old joke, because there's nothing that the taxpayer can't afford.
Yeah,
if it comes to that. So you're saying that there's been a track record from states that can be compared to ours at least, and they're finding that some of the worries that were expressed earlier haven't necessarily come to pass. Of course, Wyoming and all states take money from the federal government in other ways all the time without much incident. And so is that reassuring to an extent to think of it in those terms?
Well, I think all of us have a certain amount of hypocrisy, right? I mean, you drove down here on a federally funded road.
Exactly.
We all did.
Yeah.
2/3 of our minerals are federally owned in this state, and about half of our surface area. As part of the United States, it's a beautiful thing. But so I don't worry about that so much. I have faith in the United States and our system of government. So that's to me not an argument. I'm trying to find a way, because we know what's going to happen. We're going to reduce mortality amongst these people. We know that. We're going to cut the mortality rate, and I think that's a pro-life measure. And I think the deacon of the Catholic Church here in Cheyenne said it pretty well, Deacon Lehman. There's a balance, not every one of these initiatives takes you, in his words, to the fiery pit of socialism. And I think Abe Lincoln said it best. He said, basically, to paraphrase, nothing is wholly evil or wholly good. And in deciding public policy, you got to kind of balance, the greater good. Does it have more good than evil? And I think when we think about our people, we're gonna extend mortality. We're going to reduce mortality rates and save lives. And these people are going to be more productive. We know those studies all around the country. So we think it's the right thing to do. And if somebody's got a better idea, I'm open. We've been working on it for 10 years.
Representative Oakley, one thing that you mentioned, and you're in your second term.
That's correct.
Representative Harshman, you're in your 11th term, is that right? So there's a difference here. One thing you said you noticed, though, in just the short time you've been in, is that there's been a groundswell of public opinion that at least tells you that this is a pretty popular idea, at least among your constituents, right?
Yes, Mr. Peck. So I've been surprised. Of course, I was aware before even I was elected, right? This because it has been on the table for a long time, and I really thought that there was a lot of negative sentiment, and we see that from our body, I would say. But boy, when I'm out there, when I'm talking to people in my community of Riverton, and the numbers of emails that I've received as a legislator, boy, for me, they are, it's certainly a majority. And people are saying, why aren't you doing this? And one of the things that was striking to me when we've been looking at this, at the estimates, so in the biennium, this is estimated with using about the $20,000 people estimate for new enrollees, that it would cost $22 million over the biennium. So that's $10 to $11 million is what we're estimated that it would cost Wyoming. And when you're looking at our budgets, it's very little money for something that I very much believe and am hearing that I think it's the will of the people. I very much do.
Yeah, you said, I saw you quoted in a story by a reporter that I know, Jasmine Hall from Tribune Eagle here in Cheyenne. You said, I think we're there. Meaning that it passed out of the committee. And that doesn't mean, of course, that the bill is passed. There are lots of things that could happen. It couldn't agree on a conference version of it with the Senate. It could get amended to death. It could get defeated. It could get vetoed. I mean, I'm not predicting any of these things are going to happen. But is it fair to say that it's closer to becoming reality than it's ever been before, or is that that's not what "we're there" means? To
answer, since that's what I said, I think we are there, meaning as I've discussed, meaning the will of the people, that we've looked at other options, and that I think personally it's the right thing to do. But I've also said publicly, so not to overstate, I do not believe that the current body that's elected, the 67th legislature, will pass Medicaid expansion. I mean, I would be pleasantly surprised if I'm incorrect. But we passed it out we passed it off the floor last year, 2 years ago, in the 66th. But with the current makeup, if I were betting, I would say we're not going to pass it in the 67th legislature.
What happened 2 years ago?
It died in the Senate Health Committee, 3-2. Never was heard on the Senate floor.
So just any bill faces this minefield,
It does.
no matter what it is. The state cookie, I remember that was a disagreeable issue, incredibly, some years ago. So something like this, it may have a long way to go. I'm interested, though, in how a legislator's opinion and judgment and decision-making can be affected over time or over debate or information or any number of other things. And so here's a comparison I've thought of, and I don't mean to be flip about it. But let's say there's chocolate and strawberry ice cream here. And you say, I don't like strawberry ice cream, so no. Would you say, Representative Harshman, that today we're at a point where you like strawberry ice cream now, or you realize that, well, a lot of people are lining up for that strawberry ice cream, and it's not my place to say they shouldn't have it?
I think it's a thing, all of us as we go through life, hopefully we keep learning, and I know more, I think now at age 59 than I did at 49 when this first came to the legislature. And I hopefully know more than I did when I was 29 or 19, but too soon old, too late smart, my mother would say. But I think I've just learned more, and then we've worked on these issues. I brought an amendment when Senator Bebout and I chaired appropriations. We both agreed we were going to try to open up the state insurance plan for these issues and for employers. Couldn't do it. It's a constitutional issue. We tried cowboy care. We did pass a couple laws. One is to try to promote this charity or volunteer care. I think there is probably a clinic that might open in Lander, actually, be the only one in the state. So we've done some of this stuff, tried to expand the insurance, different programs and all that things. But the bottom line is we haven't gotten there. Yeah. And everybody said there's a better way, but nobody's brought it forward. And it's not for lack of work or effort. I think we've worked hard on the issue. But, I guess it's just finding this balance and, of regulated capitalism. Where does the public sector fit in, the private sector, and finding that balance? And that's really the issue. I agree with Ember. I think the bill with the makeup right now in the 67, it's going to be pretty tough. I think there'll be a movement to put it in the budget as well, which is appropriate because Medicaid is in the budget. Try to get it passed, at least get into some kind of discussion in the other body, but it's hard to say.
One thing that I've heard through the years is that one of the reasons that Wyoming, which is a deep red state politically, that's the reality of it. One of the objections of it was that it came from a Democratic president's administration, and if it had been from the Bush administration or perhaps the Trump administration, maybe it would have a better chance. From your positions of the real world, do you think that's fair to say, or how much of a factor is something like that, do you think?
I guess my opinion on that isn't so much that, that it was originally called Obamacare, so that certainly probably might have some effect. But we discussed earlier, what is the reticence? And the reticence in Wyoming to do a deal with the feds, that just exists. But we have to talk about the realities of this program and how much it will cost Wyoming, I think, to overcome some of that. We also discussed in committee sideboards, some of the reticence to do, I think, to partner with the federal government, which is certainly what this is, are feeling like you will have crammed down mandates on, let's say, like the types of services that could be provided. We do have the ability to put sideboards on some of that, and we discussed that.
And there is one of those in the works right now, correct?
That's correct, and actually, Chairman Harshman brought that amendment, and so do you want to discuss that?
Well, we have the Hyde Amendment in our state statutes. Wyoming is, before Roe versus Wade, abortion was illegal in Wyoming. We have the lowest or the second lowest abortion rate in the United States at 1% compared to Texas's 10% and Florida's 20%. So Wyoming has done a tremendous job in that area, and we've passed several bits of legislation. But you'll hear folks say, well, this Medicaid dollar is used for abortion. It's not true. There's been one abortion using Medicaid dollars. It was in 2002 for the life of the mother. And there are some states, but they're using state Medicaid dollars. The Hyde Amendment is still federal law. We have a state law that mirrors the Hyde Amendment, so there's not going to be any use for abortions. And so I think, to me, this is really a pro-life measure. We're going to save lives, Wyoming lives, and many of them working women. The other part I would say to you, there's another bill out there that's a step that Governor Gordon has supported too, is so we cover poor children in Medicaid, and we cover pregnant women when they have those babies, right? But we only give postpartum care for 3 months.
This is the one bill I was referring to.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, and I think there's a proposal now, a bill, it hasn't been heard in the House, passed the committee, to extend that coverage to a year. So these are mothers who didn't go to a neighboring state and abort their baby. They're Wyoming mothers, and how can we support them and their baby? I think it's another pro-life issue, but it's bordering on the fiery pit of socialism. So I don't know it'll go there. I think the other pro-life issue we got in front of us, medical care, is the 988 suicide hotline. And so your question about a Democratic president, this was signed by President Trump, 2020, as signature piece of legislation. We're the last state to implement it. And just got the data in the last couple of days. Just since we've implemented the suicide hotline, 988, it's gone from 189 suicides in this country, which leads the nation per capita, in 2021 to 155, which is still too many. And all we've done in that time is implement the 988 hotline. That bill has passed the House with no funding today, but its structure is intact, so that's good. That's moving forward.
Representative Oakley, you're in your second term now. What's the difference in your comfort level, your knowledge level, et cetera, between the first term and the second, when, among other things, you've had a chance to participate in the interim period when so much important work gets done? I'm sure it's makes a lot more sense to you now.
Yeah, it's incredible how much you learn. You're learning on the you're learning on the go. You're learning on the fly. When I came in, our class actually was during COVID restrictions, so we started online Zoom. So we didn't have the trainings, we didn't have that, and then we came down to Cheyenne, and we were in the middle of session. I've seen a lot of the training that this new freshman class has gotten, and I was like, we didn't have the benefit of that. So it really is amazing how much more comfortable you feel with the process, and then you're much more effective because you can get in and argue and participate. So I think it certainly makes you more effective, but there's only one way to go through it.
Learn by doing.
Yep.
I'll flip the question. 11th term now, you've been a rookie legislator to a seasoned legislator, committee chairman, 2 terms as speaker, back in the chairman's seat again now. What keeps you interested?
Well, I think it's a love for Wyoming. I'm really honored that people in Castro. I'm a native of Natrona County. I grew up in Midwest. Eli and I used to talk. He's the Shoshone Wrangler. I'm the Midwest Oiler. And so I'm really honored to serve, first of all, the people in House District 37. But I think there's just a love of this state. And I'll just tell you, we all in our jobs sometimes sit in a lot of meetings. And sometimes you walk out of there going, geez, did I make any difference? And I think you could say that for the legislative process, and we're sitting hours and hours and hours of meetings over the last 20 years. But I think I feel like I've been able to do some good for Wyoming in some of those meetings. They haven't been meetings in vain. Now, many of them have, but it's a building process. And many of the things you do, you don't see the fruits of that labor for a decade later. I think of the nuclear plant going in Kimmer. That was a bill I ran in 2010 and then again in 11, and all those things. So it's just, the work is fascinating. You learn a tremendous amount, I should say, and the people. That's what this is about. I mean, the people of Wyoming. And you meet so many people and you get to hear from so many people. So it's really a blessing. And Wyoming's got a beautiful thing going. We've got a great citizen legislature set up. We've got money in the bank. We don't owe anybody anything, and we have the lowest tax burden in the United States. And got the greatest schools, community colleges, and our universities. So I just think it's all these things, though. These debates we're having about health care, they had in 1890. And water, we had a debate about water, 1890, education. So these things never go away. It's just our little sliver of time why we're here to work on these issues.
Tell me what committees you're serving on this session.
So this term I am on the Judiciary Committee again, so that's a return for me. I'm serving on the Revenue Committee as the Vice Chair, so that's a fun new way to learn and experience committees. And also I'm on the Rules Committee, so I should have paid more attention to the rules last time, but I'm learning quickly.
Now I'll ask your colleague here, those are three significant committees for a second term lawmaker to be on. She's doing well.
Doing really well, yeah. I think she's worked really hard, but I think she's been recognized by her peers too. She's working hard and smart and doing a great job. So those are two really important committees.
You're chairing Revenue.
Yes.
And what's your other committee assignments?
Corporations, yeah. And I've served on Capital Finance, which is a great committee, and then School Facilities.
We just have another minute or so. Anything coming up in either of your committee dockets, for example, that you think are going to be high interest issues in the next couple of weeks?
Well, Revenue, we've got just a couple other little kind of process bills that will work quickly, but then it's property tax. That's a big issue for Wyoming, and we're going to look at relief bills. We're going to look at changing the Constitution, which is serious business. We're going to give those a lot of study, and then we'll finish up House bills here in another week and cross them over, and we'll get all those Senate bills coming on our side.
How about Judiciary?
And so obviously I'll be working the property tax, and I think that'll be a really interesting, hopefully comprehensive conversation there in the Revenue Committee. And then in Judiciary, I guess, talking about myself specifically, I've brought some criminal law bills. I'm a prosecutor in my other job, in my other world. And so with knowledge of that, I'm working some of those criminal law. We're starting to see a lot of an increase in fentanyl in our state, and certainly in my county of Fremont. So we're looking at making sure that the proper criminal statutes are in place for that, things like that.
My thanks to you both, Representative Harshman, Representative Oakley. Good to have you with us today on Capital Outlook.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Steve.
Stay with us on Capital Outlook for a conversation with the President of the Wyoming Senate. Welcome back to Capital Outlook. We're joined now by the President of the Wyoming Senate, Senator Ogden Driskill. Senator, thanks at the end of a long day for being with us. I know we're nearing the end of the third week of the session now. Things are getting a bit more specific, maybe a bit less general. You've just run through a pretty long slate of bills on the Senate floor today. What's your sense of how things have been going so far in the session?
You know, the Senate's just been unbelievable. They've been really well-oiled. You know, we're pushing 180 bills. We're going to get them all out easily. Tomorrow's the last day for introduction of bills. We've got just a handful of them laying in the bottom of my desk, so we're kind of bringing out the tail end of the bills that maybe are bills that we're kind of working with some sponsors on, or maybe think got some problems with. But all in all, the Senate's just really worked very well. We've had, as you saw today, very vigorous debate on bills, passionate debate. The civility we talked about early has been, I can't tell you how proud I am of the body. Everybody has argued issues and not argued personalities,
well,
and
you've
it
taken a
shows in our business.
Yeah, you've taken a stand on that as a leader, and I'd say that's paying off.
I think it has, and you know, I was very hardline about it, and I took quite a lot of hits over it, and you know, I think they found out that I treat people fairly as long as they want to act in a proper decorum and way, and in no way I think it shows. If you look at our debate, it's robust and honest, and I think that our guys have really responded to the fact that somebody's going to make sure that everybody treats everybody fairly, and I'm really happy with it.
Very glad to hear that. Why is there a limit, or why is there a deadline set for the introduction of new bills?
Well, if we just kept going, they'd just keep going forever. And of course, we have crossover coming up. So
crossover, you mean?
When the bills cross over from the Senate to the House, and that comes up. So you've got to have a hard cutoff date. And then we'll really change our focus starting Monday. We'll just be working a handful of these last bills. But we actually go into the supplemental budget on Monday. It will be ready, and tomorrow, I believe, the public and everybody will have a chance through the weekend to kind of digest it. Monday, the Appropriations Committee will present what joint appropriations came up with on the governor's budget, and there's some fairly substantial changes there. Tuesday, we take kind of a break and do some bills, and then Wednesday, we'll come back and do the second reading of the budget. And at that point, the entire body is allowed to run amendments on it, and those amendments may increase amounts. It may be something they want at home that they want to see if the floor will go for. It may be they think the Appropriations Committee spent too much money somewhere and they're going to take it down. So we do that on Wednesday. Thursday, we take another break. Thursday night, they have a chance to put amendments in again. And then next Friday is the third reading. We do the amendments all day, and then we pass the budget. And then the real hard work comes, because never do they totally match. So for the public, matching amendments from the House and Senate automatically go into the budget. Offsetting amendments go to a conference committee. So
Explain quickly what a conference committee is.
So after the budget's done on both sides, there'll be differences. In the conference committee, the Speaker of the House, Summers, will appoint 3 people to a conference committee. Myself, I'll appoint 3 people to a conference committee. Those people will go to a room. It's public, so if the public would like to watch the hamburger being made, we sit actually in a room and decide where we agree and where we disagree and how we're going to get together.
And this happens a lot, doesn't it?
It happens every year. It happens
lots
with the
of
budget.
bills go to conference.
They do. It's very common to happen. Your conference people tend to be your best negotiators out of your body. The more important it is, when you watch what Representative Summers sends over, that's going to be his A team. Mine will be the A team as well. They sit and they make the hard decisions. They have to stay between the upper and lower limits. So if the House has come with an amendment that adds $100 million to the budget and the Senate cuts it to 0, the conference committee can only go between the 0 and the 100.
So nobody's going to win exactly what they came in with by design.
Does not. It's absolutely a trade-off of values. It's part of what people have a hard time understanding. It doesn't seem fair. But it's really the only way you can reconcile the differences between the two bodies without just getting nowhere, and works well.
I looked over the list of bills yesterday. Between the two houses, we're up over close to 500 now. What is your rationale as a leader for deciding or recommending which bills come forward and which don't?
So almost all the bills come forward. My kind of criteria for the bills that won't come forward, and there'll be a few, is if I think they're going to damage the state of Wyoming in some way, that they're really just not good policy, and that we can't fix them with debate, then I'm probably going to sit on them. You also will find with me, and it's one of the first times this has happened, we did one of the abortion bills today. They tend to be a little bit passionate. I have held back the gun bills and the abortion bills till after the budget, because we tend to get upset where people are really passionate. You know, money's one thing, but when you start getting into guns and your personal issues, they tend to get really passionate and people get upset. And so we're waiting until towards the end so everybody can kind of go through on a steady keel. And we've really been level and steady, including today on, we had the chemical abortion bill today, which is it's a tough bill. Very different viewpoints on people. Healthy debate, and we came out of it with everybody feeling like they'd been treated fairly.
This is a general session as compared to the shorter budget sessions, which happen in even-numbered years, but realistically speaking, every session's a budget session, isn't it?
It is nowadays. It didn't used to be in the old days. We used to have the budget session where you set the biennial budget. And the truth is our ups and downs have been so big in the state of Wyoming. Everybody thinks of the supplemental as a year like this year, and we've actually got a couple $2 billion out there surplus. About 3 short years ago, we had $1 billion shortage, and the supplemental at that point in time was not to spend money. It was how do we cut $400 million to $500 million out of the budget. Those are tough ones, but they are de facto budget bills in a non-budget year.
Do you find in a way, or that maybe you or some legislators do, that in some ways when there's a shortfall and there's really no choice but to cut, that somehow that can be almost an easier process than if you have a lot of extra money and so many options to spend it?
So the shortfalls have been easier, I will tell you that. They're not easy in the fact that I can tell you from a legislative standpoint, when you have to look a state employee in the eye and say, and by the way, we've cut very few live positions, but we cut pieces out of working parts of agencies. It's difficult, but in a way it's easier. Now we're down to the point is, how much do we save? How much do we allocate to schools? What do you do for short term? And then the other one is what are your optics going forward of the budget? Because we actually have to look and say, do we think the good times will continue? And if we think that's true, then you probably invest a little more into some maybe a little less serious projects that could help. Or if you think we're going into tough times, it may mean that we put a few less dollars into long-term savings and a few more that we kind of stash it away that we can get to it in case we have to. And I can tell you, I'm one of the ones I'm very concerned when you look at national trends. Wyoming's economy right now, so our budget is roughly 25 to 28% of our general fund comes off investment income. That leaves the state incredibly vulnerable to a downturn that if you roll the stock market back with $25 billion, you can lose a lot of money in a hurry, and it affects our savings. Usually at the same time that happens is when our coal sales drop, oil and gas go down. So Wyoming tends to hit perfect storms. When they hit going up this year, they're crazy up, and when they're down, they're crazy down. So it leaves it really hard because we don't have the stability that some states do, that their tax revenue just does this.
And we probably won't.
I don't think that's going to change, at least for the foreseeable future. No, sir.
I've noticed in watching some committee hearings that occasionally there'll be more than one bill addressing essentially the same topic. When something like that happens, what is the procedure that eventually pares it down to one, if that's what happens?
So at least what's happening on our side. So for me, the President of the Senate assigns those bills. And for me, the example I'm going to use, it's near and dear to everybody in Wyoming, is property taxes.
Right.
I think we have, to the tune, and I hate to misquote, but probably 6 or 7 property tax bills. Those have all gone to Senator Beitman's committee. That's committee number 3, Revenue. And so I have trusted Senator Beitman to allow him to stack those bills in the order he thinks they make the most sense. And ironically, the first bill that came up just happened to be one of Senator Beitman's bills today. It's a good bill. It's a simple bill. And I think it's going to come out of the Senate favorably. It'll have some amendments on it. We're going to work it through. Then you're going to find the other 5 or 6 bills that are behind. Probably for me, I'm going to ask him to go ahead and sit on those bills till the end of session. We'll see what happens with his bill, but there's no reason to bring out big numbers of competing bills. The only thing that happens is if a senator came and he was very passionate, he wanted to see it, I'd probably ask Senator Beitman to bring it up so we could have it debated, so we could compare the two. You
rely a lot on these committee chairs, don't you?
I do. You know, I took a lot of heat. I put a lot of new people in chairs. Senator Beitman was one of them, and I'm really proud of my chairs. They've carried an incredible workload. A lot of them are doing committees they've never done before. I think they're doing really high quality work, and it shows on the floor. Their bills are debated good. The floor trusts the people. And yeah, your chairs are the heart. The president really sits there and he's just a leader that puts things together and helps other people. Your chairmen are down in the trenches and they're doing the day-to-day work and make it happen.
I heard you say close to the end of the session today that some of the bills that the committees are going to be getting in the next few days are not bills that committee normally would expect to get. And the committees have names, Judiciary and Revenue and Appropriations, that have to do with general topic areas, but there's nothing that says, especially if one committee might be carrying a bigger load than the other, and it sounds like possibly Senator Beitman's committee might be, that you could move a bill to a different committee.
And we will. So we have 3 committees that are virtually out of bills. They've worked good. Their committees didn't have full workload, and those 3 are Transportation, Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife. and trying to think, but we had 3 of the committees. And so I made an announcement publicly so we don't have people feeling like I'm playing games. And you can play games as President of the Senate if I've got a bill that, particularly a bill that I'm passionate about, and I know a committee's going to kill the bill and it won't get a fair hearing. You'll see me send it to another committee, not to make it pass, but to make it get to the floor so we can have the honest debate. If you've got a chairman that hates a bill, and we know they're out there, I want that fair debate. I want the people and the senator that brought it to be able to have a chance to have his bill have a fair hearing. The other reason you do it is workload, and so you'll see some bills that really probably normally Judiciary handles all the court bills and all of it. All your voter bills tend to go to corporations, tax bills go. So we're going to shuffle some of those bills. And the process I used for that was I took the list and I actually took it to the chairman of the ones that were short and said, take a marker and show me which ones you think should go to your committee and tell me why. And so tomorrow morning you'll have me read in, there'll be 15 bills that get moved to other committees. And that's so our workload can get done, everybody's bill gets heard, and instead of having bills die because they don't get heard, they all get a chance to get heard.
Let me ask you a bit about this, and we're down to a couple of minutes left, about some differences of opinion on remote participation in a committee hearing especially. I've attended some where we're seeing people who are not in the Capitol, who are some location miles, hundreds of miles away sometimes, commenting on a bill, and other committees, other chairs of the committees don't want that to happen. That's at the discretion of the chair?
It is, and you know, we're in a new era. When we went through the COVID was the advent of remote testimony. No one had even thought about considering it, particularly for the Senate itself, or House body. Yeah. Now we've left it to chairs, and I think you'll find over the next 3 or 4 years we'll firm up a policy. You know, part of the problem we're having is you may have 100 comments from out of state on a bill, and I'll be honest with anybody, I'll look in the audience, and we're openly biased towards Wyoming people. That's who we represent. So someone in Iowa or Washington or Illinois shouldn't have the same voice someone for Wyoming. I also, and I'm one of the personal ones, I'm kind of a stickler that I like seeing good dress in front of them. So, you know, I wish if we were doing remote participation that you dress appropriately.
Just as you would if you were there in the committee room.
And I always give a preference to those who show up. If you want to make the effort to drive to Cheyenne, it says volumes about how passionate you are about the bill. If you want to sit in your house and kind of do it at your convenience, I'm guessing it's not quite the same. That being said, it's really important we get testimony from all areas. So, you know, we're trying to accommodate, and we're learning how to do it in a better fashion.
Yeah, I think a lot of things coming out of the COVID situation, things we did by necessity, because there really was no choice. Now that we no longer must do it that way, there are things that are worth considering, that are maybe worth keeping from that time, and others maybe there are. This sounds like one of those.
Unbelievable what's changed. You know, the transparency is crazy. So I've been in a pretty short 12 years. When I went in, there was no recording of any of the debates on the floor. None of the committees had anything. You just got a vote tally read out. And now in this 12 years, every committee is recorded. You can go back and actually, if your representative or your senator tells you this is what I said and you don't believe it, you can actually go to the state website, Wyoming Legislature, look it up. You can pull up that day. You can watch the video and the audio. You can listen to live floor debate on the floor. We've never had a time that the public's been more involved and had more ability for direct participation ever than this. And it will change how the legislature works going forward.
For the better, do you think?
Oh, much more for the better. You're going to be clear and honest because you're going to get called. In the old days, it was, well, I really didn't say that. And today it's, I really didn't say that. And they pick their phone up and hand it to you and said, well, yes, sir, you did say that.
I guess I did say that.
Yeah.
And it's understandable. Sometimes in a long legislative session, maybe you don't remember everything you said. So it could be of use to the lawmakers themselves.
There's no doubt, and it also makes you be more careful. And I can tell you, for me, I've always been one of the ones that's took pride. I will misspeak on the floor. When you're talking numbers, you transpose, you make mistakes. And I've always, when someone calls me up and says, you made a mistake, I stand up on the floor and apologize and state it, but not everyone does that. And this keeps you a lot more honest. And there's nothing worse than to have one of your bills be killed by testimony that's not true. And so, what we all want's honest, passionate debate using actual facts.
I would think maybe in terms of these decorum issues that you've stressed so much, I wonder what the effect of remote participation, number one, and recording of every moment, number two, might have on the personal decorum, behavior, comportment of the legislators. You suppose it makes them, the more volatile ones, behave a little more calmly, or do you know for sure?
I would hope so. Obviously, if you're doing something that's bad, it's going to be on live video, and it's pretty hard to refute when you get up and act like a horse is something or other. It's pretty easy for people to understand that's the way you're acting. And I think you'll find nearly always your good, effective legislators really operate in a very, without doing gender specific, gentlemanly way. They act like statesmen, and those people tend to be listened to better and get by better. And I think as we go through that, you're going to find we have way more statesmen that figure out that through good behavior, you're a more effective legislator than you are through trying to use force or intimidation.
Senator Driskill, I appreciate your time here at the end of a long work day. Many more of those to come. We'll have you back on Capitol Outlook again, I hope. For now, thanks for being with us, and good luck with the session.
30 days and 60 nights. Thank you.
Welcome back to Capitol Outlook. Most Wyoming residents are proud of our state's official motto, the Equality State, owing to Wyoming's position as the first state, actually in territorial days before statehood, to grant women the right to vote, and as the first state of the Union to elect a woman as governor. At the Wyoming Supreme Court in Cheyenne, Chief Justice Kate Fox often points visitors to a portion of the building dedicated to commemorating historic, pioneering women in Wyoming government and jurisprudence. Chief Justice Fox, where are we now and who are we looking at?
This is the Equality Hall in the basement of the Wyoming Supreme Court. And this is a portrait of Marilyn Kite, who was the first female Wyoming Supreme Court justice. I think she started on the court in 2000. She was also the first chief. Here is Betty Kale, the first female county court and district court judge. Then we get into history. This is Nellie Taylor Ross, the first female governor.
In the nation, not just Wyoming.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. And then I think the rest of these women are first in the nation as well. So Grace Hebard, first female member of the state bar. Esther Hobart Morris, most people have heard of her. She was the first female justice of the peace.
She has a statue at the state capitol now.
She does. Louisa Gardner Swain, the first female voter. And Martha Simmons Boys, first female court bailiff. And then we have Eliza Boyd, first female juror. And you'll see here we have a mirror with the robe so that the people who come through here can see themselves as our next female judge or justice.
When the legislature is in session, the Chief Justice delivers her annual State of the Judiciary address. This year, that happened on January 11th.
We're never just talking about the judicial branch. We're talking about all the people of the state of Wyoming and all the branches because they're interrelated. And it's true, lean is good. We like lean in the judicial branch as well, but we don't like crippled. We still need to be able to do our work.
As the least visible branch of the three branches of state government, the judicial is prone to misunderstanding. Again, Chief Justice Fox points to a fun and engaging learning resource in her own building.
Certainly there are things that we wish people understood better about the judiciary, and that's why we have the Judicial Learning Center in the basement of the Wyoming Supreme Court, because we encourage not just school kids, but everybody to come and understand better how we function and what the parameters are within which we function.
Unlike the federal courts, the system for selecting new judges in Wyoming is kept separate from the legislature, something Chief Justice Fox thinks is a good thing.
That I think is one of the great aspects of how we choose judges here. It's called the merit selection system. All judges, circuit court, district court, and Supreme Court, are selected the same way. There's a judicial nominating commission made up of 3 attorneys, 3 non-attorneys who are selected by the governor, and the chief chairs it. So yes, first the person has to express their interest and submit, it's called an expression of interest, but it's an application. And along with that, a writing sample and 3 references from judges, 3 from attorneys, 2 personal references. So there's a lot of material. The commission reviews it all, decides who to interview, conducts interviews, sends 3 names to the governor. Then the governor has 30 days to choose. This is another beautiful thing about our system. There's a really strict timeline in the Constitution. The commission has 60 days to get 3 names. The governor has 30 days to pick. So it isn't like the federal system where they have vacancies forever because they have whatever political wrangling going on. I say, if your shortstop is no longer available, you just don't wait to get another one, right?
Don't play with 8.
You gotta get out there on the field and keep playing. So we pick them fast, and there's no legislative involvement.
Fewer than 25% of Wyoming's elected legislators are women, but the number is growing. At the federal level, 2 of Wyoming's 3 delegates to the United States Congress are women, U.S. Senator Cynthia Lummis and U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman. And in Wyoming, in the judicial branch, an important milestone finally has been reached. The Wyoming Supreme Court now is majority women. How significant is that? Is it?
Oh, I think it's significant. What it stands for is the fact that we now have a lot of really accomplished female attorneys in Wyoming, because that's where the judges come from. You know, Marilyn Kite was the first woman on the Supreme Court, and then the first chief. I was the second woman, and I thought that was a big deal when we had a pretty short period of time during which we were both on the court that there were 2 women. And then she retired, and I thought, well, I'll be the only one for a while. And then blam.
2 since then.
Yeah, now we have 3 very accomplished jurists, and it's really impressive to have 3 women sitting at a bench with 2 other men. And I think the significance too is that, you know, when we talk to these students who come in, the young people and law students and young lawyers who say, wow, that's possible for us.
Thanks for being with us on Capital Outlook, and join us again next week.
This program is supported in part by a grant from the BNSF Railway Foundation, dedicated to improving the general welfare and quality of life in communities throughout the BNSF Railway service area. Proud to support Wyoming PBS.
And by the members of Wyoming PBS. Thank you for your support.